Have you ever tried to learn a behavior and just found it difficult, and you try and you fail and you try and you fail and you try and you fail, and you feel like maybe if you just had a little push in the right direction, you'd be successful in producing the behavior? Well, today we're going to talk about those little pushes in the right direction. Hi, my name is Dr. Igor Juricevic, and this is Functional Analysis of Behavior 1. Let's go. All right, so last time we talked about stimulus control, where we bring a behavior under the control of a discriminative stimulus so that it occurs more often in the presence of that discriminative stimulus and less often when the discriminative stimulus is not there. And if you haven't watched that video, I highly recommend go back, check it out before watching this video, because today we're going to be talking about response and stimuli prompts. And these prompts are supplementary antecedent stimuli used to correct a response in the presence of the natural discriminative stimulus that will eventually control the behavior. So that quote is a lot to understand, but we're going to take a look at it today. And basically, you can think of these response and stimulus prompts as stimuli or information that is added to the actual naturally occurring discriminative stimulus to help a person produce the behavior under that discriminative stimulus presence. So now that we have that context, let's go through that quote by Cooper, Heron, and Hewer just one more time. So prompts are supplementary antecedent stimuli. That means they're added, they're supplementary antecedent stimuli. They occur before, used to occasion a correct response in the presence of the natural discriminative stimuli. This is the discriminative stimulus that we're trying to get stimulus control for that will eventually control the behavior. So they're supplementary, they're added stimuli that are done in the presence of the naturally occurring stimulus that we hope will eventually control the behavior. That probably made a lot more sense the second time through. So there are two general types of prompts, response and stimulus prompts. We're going to start off with the response prompts. So Cooper, Heron, and Hewer mentioned that response prompts operate directly on the response, hence the response prompt name. Response prompts operate directly on the response to cue a correct response. The three major forms of response prompts are verbal instructions, modeling, and physical guidance. So these prompts, these response prompts, they're basically extra help that help an individual produce the behavior, and the response prompts actually act on the behavior. Stimulus prompts act on the stimulus, response prompts act on the behavior, and they come in the forms of verbal instructions, modeling, and physical guidance. So let's start off with verbal instructions. So verbal prompts or verbal instructions are instructions that help to clarify a behavior or let somebody know how to do a particular behavior. Now, it's important to note that verbal instructions or verbal prompts can either be vocal or non-vocal. If they're vocal, that means that somebody is saying them aloud. So for example, as much as this video is an instruction, this is a vocal prompt because I'm saying these things out loud. There's also non-vocal verbal instructions, and these are things like instructions in a manual or in a how-to guide. So both things are covered under the idea or the concept of verbal prompts, i.e. verbal instructions. So these instructions, we've all encountered them. So anytime somebody has given you verbal guidance on how to do something, anytime you've read instructions in a manual, this is information that acts directly on the behavior, directly on the response. So it is affecting the response, hence it is a response prompt. So things like instructions on how to do a behavior. So you're going to give the jewels to Betty and make sure you give it to her nice and slow. Nice and slow is the verbal prompt. Instructions that help clarify a behavior. So somebody tells you keep the change, and if it's the first time you heard that, you might be confused. So they give you a verbal prompt that says, hey, that means don't give me my change back. And these verbal instructions or verbal prompts can also include those step-by-step instructions. So a boxing coach might say to you, jab. That's a discriminative stimulus. That means that jabbing behavior, throwing a jab, is going to be reinforced. But then they might need to help you along, prompt that behavior by giving you step-by-step instructions. And those are the verbal prompts that act on the behavior to help you produce that correct jabbing behavior. All right, so another response prompt is modeling. And modeling is where a teacher, such as an applied behavior analyst, will actually model or demonstrate the desired behavior to the learner. So this is where the teacher will actually do what the learner is expected to do, i.e. model that behavior, how to do it for the learner. And this is something that is especially effective if the learner is able to perform some of the component behaviors required for imitating the model. So the first requirement is that the learner can imitate. So if the learner doesn't have that ability yet, the ability to imitate, to attend and imitate, then modeling is not going to be an option for this particular learner. However, if they can imitate and then they can do some components of the behavior, then you can model the behavior as a response prompt to help them produce that behavior in the presence of a discriminative stimulus. So for example, if a person knows how to move side to side and they know how to hold things, then at a dance, you can model the behavior of dancing, model the behavior of your hand. It's supposed to go here, your hand, the other hand goes here. You move back and forth, back and forth. You can actually do that behavior. It's a little restrictive in this recording environment, but you can actually do that behavior for the learner, and then that behavior is modeled, and that response prompt helps them to then put those components together and produce the behavior of dancing. All right, and the last response prompt that we're going to take a look at is physical guidance. And physical guidance is where the teacher actually physically guides the learner, either partially or entirely, through the response that is desired. So this is the actual, it's exactly like what it says on the tin. This is actually getting into physical contact with the learner and moving them in the way that produces a particular behavior. So for example, if somebody has gotten into an accident and they need to go through physical rehabilitation and they need to relearn how to walk, somebody might actually move their arms and move their legs for them, actually hold on to their legs and move them in the way that they're supposed to move as a response prompt to help them produce the correct walking behavior. You can also do this by placing somebody's body in the correct position. So if you're pushing a baby stroller and you don't want it to tip over, you might tell the person, put your one hand here. Not tell a person, sorry, mistake, not tell a person, actually take their hand and say you put one hand on this part of the stroller, you put the other hand on this part of the stroller, and that is physical guidance, a response prompt that again acts directly on the response, but allows a person who might not have the requisite skills required like they did in modeling, might not have those skills, but can produce the correct behavior if their physical guidance is there to help them. All right, so those were the three response prompts. Now we're going to take a look at stimulus prompts. And stimulus prompts, they don't act on the behavior, they don't act on the response. They operate directly on the antecedent task stimuli to cue that correct response in conjunction with the critical discriminative stimulus. What that means is basically you have the discriminative stimulus that you are trying to establish stimulus control for, but then you add other stimuli that can signal the correct response. So stimulus prompts, one of the ways that they are used is in choice behaviors. So when you're trying to train somebody to make the correct choice, oftentimes it's great to use a stimulus prompt that makes that correct choice, that critical discriminative stimulus, makes that correct choice more obvious. So for example, if you're trying to teach somebody to choose the largest number and you have a whole bunch of numbers laid out in front of them, let's say that it's a primary school and you have a plastic number 4, you got a plastic number 7, you got a plastic number 10 laid out in front of the child, and you want them to point to the correct choice. One thing that you can do is you can make the correct choice always the same color. So if you ask them, hey, could you point to the biggest number? If the biggest number is always blue, that is a stimulus prompt that can help them learn the correct behavior of pointing to the largest number. You could change your voice for the correct choice as a stimulus prompt. So you might ask them, well, which one of these numbers is biggest? Is it the 3? Is it the 7? Or is it the 10? Right? So you're not telling them the answer, but you're giving them that little extra bit of a stimulus, that little extra bit of a clue as to what the correct behavior is. And again, it's not acting on the actual response. They know how to make the response. It's acting on the stimulus. It's telling them, hey, that 10, that large stimulus, that large number is the correct stimulus. And we do this so often using stimulus prompts. So another one that you can do is you can just indicate with your eyes. So I don't know if you can see my eyes, but you know how some people are like, hey, which one is the correct number? Which one's the largest number? And they're like, it's just, well, that's a stimulus prompt. Again, another stimuli that is added to the correct stimulus, the discriminative stimulus of that large number. However, it's added to the stimulus, not to the response. Again, there's nothing that is being done to indicate how to point, but now it's the stimulus, it's indicating where to point. All right, so that was our look at response and stimulus prompts. So we took a look at the idea of prompts and what they are. We took a look at response prompts, including verbal instructions, including modeling, and including physical guidance. And then we took a look at stimulus prompts that basically add information to a stimulus that is redundant to help people make the right choice. So next time we're going to take a look at shaping, and this is where you take an existing behavior and you can develop it into something phenomenal. But until then, thank you so much for joining me on this video. Stay frosty, stay functional. All right, as promised in the last video, this was new and it was for Halloween because again, I go authentic, I go real. And it's going to be part of a costume and I'm going to be this guy, J. Jonah Jameson, because this is the first Halloween where my son actually understands the concept of Halloween and he wants to be Spider-Man. So of course I had to join in. I'm going to be Spider-Man's arch nemesis, J. Jonah Jameson, and I'm going to go around their neighborhood all night just screaming, he's a menace, he's a menace, Spider-Man. Anyway, thank you for joining me. Stay frosty, stay functional.